I never really believed love could be divided, but in our house it was. My mother had a favorite, and it wasn't me. Claire was the golden child, the one whose laughter filled the rooms and whose mistakes were forgiven before they were even noticed. I was the quiet one, the helper, the one who learned early that some kinds of love come with conditions. Sometimes at night, I would hear Mom on the phone with Claire. She'd laugh so hard her voice would tremble through the thin walls, saying things like, "Oh honey, don't worry. I'll cover that for you. You deserve to enjoy yourself." And I would lie there in my small apartment, the one I could barely afford on my teacher's salary, staring at my ceiling fan turning in slow, steady circles. I'd wait for my phone to light up with a text that never came. If you've ever been the forgotten one in your own family, you'll understand how that silence feels. Before I tell you what happened, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because this isn't just a story about revenge, it's a story about learning how to stop begging for love that should have been yours all along. I grew up in Seattle in a neighborhood where the rain never really stopped, it just softened. Mom always said she loved the smell of wet pavement. I used to think she loved the rain because it hid tears. Ours was a small two-story house, ivy crawling up the porch railings, chipped paint on the steps, a wind chime that never stopped moving. When I was little, I thought that house was magic. It had all my drawings taped to the fridge, and the smell of cinnamon whenever Mom baked her favorite rolls. But somewhere between then and now, the warmth in that house began to fade like color draining from an old photograph. I was 8 when I realized Claire was the favorite. We were playing in the yard when she broke Mom's glass bird feeder. I remember standing there, holding the string while shards glittered in the grass like tears. Mom rushed out, looked straight at me, and said, "Amelia, how could you?" I started to speak, but Claire's big blue eyes filled with tears, and suddenly it didn't matter what I said. Mom wrapped her arms around Claire and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart, accidents happen." That was the first time I learned silence could be punishment. Years went by and nothing changed. Claire became the cheerleader, the homecoming queen, the one with bright dreams and people who wanted to see her win. I became the listener, the reliable one, the one who paid her own phone bill at 16 because Mom said, "You're responsible enough to handle it." When college came around, Mom used her savings for Claire's tuition in California. She told me gently, "You're the practical one, Amelia. You can manage student loans." I managed. I worked nights in the campus library, ate ramen for dinner, and told myself I was proud of my independence. But pride feels thin when you're hungry. Claire graduated, came home for a while, and soon met Jason, the man who would become her husband. He was everything my mother wanted for her daughter. Charming, confident, well-dressed. I attended their engagement party wearing a thrifted dress I'd altered myself. Mom told me, "You look neat." Then she turned to Claire and gasped over her new diamond. The day Mom said she couldn't help with my wedding was the day I stopped pretending not to notice. She said, "Sweetheart, we're having some financial trouble right now. You know how the economy is." I believed her, of course I did, because even after everything, part of me still wanted to believe she loved us equally. I told my fiancé, Ben, that we'd make do smaller venue, fewer guests, cheaper dress. He just kissed my forehead and said, "It's okay as long as it's us." But 3 weeks later, scrolling through Instagram, I saw Claire and Jason on a beach in Maui. Their honeymoon, paid for by Mom and Dad. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, my coffee going cold in my hands. I zoomed in on the caption, "Family gift, thank you Mom and Dad for making our dream come true." I didn't cry immediately. I just sat there numb. When tears finally came, they were quiet, not angry, just tired. I thought about the years I'd covered my own bills, the birthdays I'd spent alone because Claire needed help with something, the time Mom told me she was proud of me for not needing much. I realized it wasn't pride, it was convenience. A month later, Mom called. Her voice was soft, careful. "Amy, honey, we're in a bit of a situation. Your father made a bad investment and we might lose the house. I hate to ask, but could you lend us something? Maybe around $150,000, just until we get back on our feet." I couldn't breathe for a moment. The same woman who couldn't afford to help me buy a wedding dress was now asking for 6 figures. I asked quietly, "What about Claire?" "Oh, she and Jason are still getting settled." Mom said quickly, "You've always been the responsible one, Amelia. I know I can count on you." Something inside me broke, not like glass, but like ice cracking under pressure. Slowly, silently, I said, "Come by tomorrow. I'll have something for you." That night, I went through the box I'd kept under my bed, the one filled with old letters, unpaid bills, and little memories from a life where I still believed I mattered. I pulled out the letter Mom had written me when I left for college, the one that said, "You'll always be my steady girl. Claire might shine, but you'll never let me down." I read it again and realized what it truly meant. You'll always carry the weight. I didn't sleep much. At sunrise, I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and looked at the balance in my savings, the one I'd built from years of skipping vacations, working double shifts, and telling myself it would all be worth it someday. It was worth it now, but not in the way she thought. At noon, she arrived, dressed neatly, smiling like nothing had ever gone wrong. "You look tired, sweetheart," she said, her eyes scanning the small apartment I'd made into a home. Still living alone, I handed her an envelope. She smiled, relieved. "Oh, Amy, you have no idea how much this means to us." She stopped mid-sentence when she looked inside. Not a check, not cash, a photo. A photo of me standing in front of a small house, the one I had just bought 2 weeks ago in a quiet Seattle neighborhood. "Paid in full, no mortgage, no loans, take this instead," I said softly. "It's the address. It's not for you to live in, it's just something I wanted you to see. I did it without anyone's help, without yours." Her lips parted, eyes wide. For a second, she looked 10 years older. Then she fainted right there on my rug. I remember kneeling beside her, my hands trembling. I wasn't angry anymore, just sad. Sad that it took this a collapse for her to see what she'd missed all along. When she came to, I offered her water. She looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Amelia," she whispered, "you bought a house." "Yes," I said. "I've been saving since I was 20. Too, you told me to be responsible." I was. Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't know." "I know." I interrupted quietly. "That's the point." She left soon after. No money changed hands. Just silence, the same kind that had lived between us for years. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the rain blur the city lights. I thought about forgiveness, how everyone says it's freeing, but no one tells you it can also be lonely. I didn't forgive her that night, but I didn't hate her either. I just finally stopped trying to be loved the way she loved Claire. I started loving myself instead, and that was the beginning of everything I became afterward. After she left my apartment that afternoon, the silence stayed like perfume, invisible, but impossible to ignore. For a few hours, I sat there with the faint imprint of her hand still on the coffee mug, her perfume clinging to the air, her shock echoing in my head. The envelope was gone, but what lingered was heavier, the weight of every word she hadn't said for years. For the next few days, there was nothing. No calls, no texts. Not even one of those family group messages that always started with Claire's name and ended with mine forgotten. I went to work, taught my students how to mix colors and paint with feeling, and came home to the quiet hum of my new refrigerator and the sound of rain on the porch roof. It felt strange peaceful, but hollow too, like peace that cost too much. On the 4th night, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Claire. "Mom told me what happened. Are you proud of yourself? You could have just helped instead of humiliating her." I stared at the screen, the anger I thought I'd buried flickering awake. I didn't reply. I just set the phone down and sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. She would never understand, not because she was cruel, but because she'd never been forced to. She had always been protected from consequences, wrapped in warmth I'd never known. 2 weeks passed before Mom called again. Her voice was smaller this time. "Amy, can we talk? Just talk?" I hesitated, then agreed to meet her at the little cafe near Green Lake, the same one she used to take us to when we were kids. It smelled the same: cinnamon, coffee, and rain. Soaked coats. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting by the window, stirring her tea even though there was nothing left to dissolve. She looked different, tired, older somehow. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I didn't think you would." I sat down, folded my hands around my cup. You asked? She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. I didn't come to ask for money. I've been thinking about what you said, about everything. I didn't know how to respond, so I waited. I was unfair to you, she continued, voice trembling. You were always the strong one, and I thought that meant you didn't need me as much. Claire, she's fragile, and I wanted to protect her. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that you were my daughter too. The words were soft, careful, like she was afraid of breaking something that was already shattered. I felt tears sting the back of my eyes, but I blinked them away. You didn't forget, Mom, I said quietly. You chose. She flinched, and I hated myself for saying it, but it was true. I know, she whispered. And I can't undo it, but I see it now, and it's awful. I saw your picture standing in front of that house. You looked so proud, so peaceful. I realized I don't even know who you've become. I missed everything. Something inside me cracked open, not anger, just ache. You still can, I said, surprising myself, but you'll have to stop pretending nothing happened. She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I'm trying. We talked for over an hour about nothing and everything. About Dad's failing health, about Claire's marriage already showing small fractures, about how time can turn love into habit if you're not careful. When I left, she hugged me tightly, the kind of hug I hadn't felt since I was a child. For a moment I let her, but as I walked out into the misty air, I realized something. Forgiveness doesn't mean return. It means release. That night, I sat in my living room with my favorite candle, lit the lavender one that made the house smell like calm. I thought about all the things I'd lost by trying too hard to earn love. I thought about the times I'd gone home with handmade gifts just to see Claire's store. Bought ones get all the praise. I remembered every maybe next time. And we're just so proud of your sister. I remembered shrinking myself so they could shine. And then I realized I didn't need them to see me anymore. I just needed to see myself. The next few months were quiet. Work picked up. My students were preparing for a small art show at the local library, and I threw myself into helping them. Seeing their faces light up when their paintings were framed reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. Joy that isn't tied to anyone's approval. Around that time, I got a message from an old friend, Nora, who ran a small art studio downtown. She said she was looking for someone to manage community classes painting for kids, creative therapy for seniors. It was exactly the kind of work that made my heart full. When I told Mom about it over the phone, yes, we had started talking occasionally, she sounded genuinely proud. That sounds wonderful, Amy. You've always been good at giving people light. It was strange hearing that from her. It felt both comforting and painful, like a compliment wrapped around an old scar. Still, I accepted the offer. The studio became my second home. On weekends, I painted my own pieces again, something I hadn't done since college. I started using bright colors for the first time in years, oranges, yellows, deep blues. My coworkers noticed. You seem happier, one said. I smiled. I think I finally am. Then one Sunday morning, as sunlight streamed through my window, I got another message from Claire. I don't know how you do it. Mom talks about you all the time now. It's like you're her favorite suddenly. Guess I should be happy for you. I stared at the message for a while before replying. It's not about being anyone's favorite, Claire. It's about finally being okay with not needing to be. She didn't reply. She probably never would, but that was fine. For the first time, I didn't need closure from her. I had given it to myself. A few months later, Mom came to see my studio. She walked in quietly, looking around at the kids painting rainbows and the elderly man sculpting a tiny clay bird. I watched her eyes soften, the corners of her mouth trembling. This is beautiful, she whispered. I didn't know you could create something like this. I didn't either, I said, until I stopped trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix. She smiled faintly, tears shining. I wish I had seen you sooner. You're seeing me now, I replied gently. She hugged me again, tighter this time, but with something different in it. Not pity, not guilt, just quiet recognition. When she left, I stood by the door for a long while, listening to the echo of her footsteps fading away. I didn't feel empty this time. I felt calm. I realized something then: revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just peace that the other person has to watch from the outside, and that peace, once you find it, becomes your final answer to all the years they made you question your worth. That night, I wrote in my journal, the same one I've been keeping since the beginning of this story. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's remembering, but without the pain. It's seeing the same faces and realizing they no longer control the way your heart beats. For the first time in years, I signed it with a smile. Amelia Winter came early that year. The leaves barely had time to turn gold before the wind stripped them bare. I used to dread this season, the way the cold seemed to sneak into my bones and make everything feel heavier. But that year, it felt different. My little house by the lake felt alive. Every morning I'd wake to mist rolling over the water and birds gathering on the frozen shore. Sometimes I'd sit by the window with my coffee, watching the light shift, feeling like I was finally part of something steady. The art studio grew busier by the week. We started a program for children with disabilities, and the laughter that filled those rooms was something sacred. I saw shy kids discover confidence through color, and lonely seniors find companionship in shared creation. It was strange the same world that once ignored me was now giving me back pieces of myself I didn't know I'd lost. Mom visited more often, though always cautiously, as if afraid she might overstep. Each time she came, she brought something, an old family photo, a jar of her homemade jam, once even a painting she tried to copy from one of my old sketches. It was clumsy but full of heart. She'd sit quietly during my classes, watching me move among my students, eyes soft, proud, and full of something that looked like remorse. One evening after class, she lingered while everyone else left. The golden hour light caught in her silver hair, and for a second, she looked like someone I barely remembered, the mother who used to hum while cooking dinner. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that day," she told me, tracing the rim of her teacup. "About forgiveness not meaning return. I think I understand now." I nodded, waiting. "You were right to walk away," she said, "and I'm proud that you did. I wish I'd had that kind of strength when I was your age. Maybe things would have been different." I looked at her, really looked. For years, I'd wanted her to say those words, but now that she had, it didn't feel like victory, it felt like peace. "We all learn when we're ready," I said softly. She smiled faintly. "You sound like a teacher." "I am," I replied, "just not in the way I thought I'd be." After she left, I sat for a while in the quiet, staring at the empty chair across from me. There was something bittersweet in it, like closing a book you've read too many times, finally ready to let it rest. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I received a letter from a local art foundation. They'd seen some of my students' work online and wanted to sponsor a community exhibit under my name. The Grant Gallery, they called it. For a moment, I just stared at the words, the irony washing over me. The name that had once carried so much pain now stood for something beautiful. When I told Mom, she cried, "You're doing something special, Amelia." She whispered over the phone, "Your father would have been so proud." That last line caught me off guard. I hadn't thought of him in years. He died quietly, far away from the mess he'd left behind. For a long time, I blamed him for everything, for leaving, for setting the pattern of absence that Mom and Claire only repeated. But that night, I opened the small wooden box that held the few things of his I'd kept, a watch, a faded photo, and a note he'd written to me when I was 16. "Don't let their noise drown your melody. You were born to paint light into dark places." I finally understood what he meant. When the Grant Gallery opened, the turnout stunned me. Parents, students, neighbors, even a few reporters came. The walls were filled with paintings not of sadness, but of strength. Children's laughter echoed through the room, the kind that makes you forget there was ever silence before. Mom came, wearing the same navy coat she used to wear to church, her eyes shining with pride and regret all at once. Claire showed up too, standing awkwardly near the back. I hadn't expected her. When I saw her, something inside me tightened, the old ache, the instinct to shrink. But then I looked around at the people smiling, the art glowing in the golden light, and the tension melted away. I walked up to her and smiled. "Thank you for coming." She looked startled, almost defensive. "Mom insisted, said I should see what you've built." "And what do you think?" She hesitated, glancing around. "It's actually beautiful. I didn't think you could pull off something like this on your own." I smiled again, not at the jab, but at the familiarity of it. That's the thing about being underestimated, I said quietly. It teaches you how to build without applause. She blinked, unsure how to respond. For a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes, not jealousy, not superiority, just realization. Mom joined us then, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. She's done something wonderful, hasn't she, Claire? Claire nodded, her lips parting, her pride clashing with guilt. Yeah, she said finally, she has. For the rest of the evening, I moved through the crowd, greeting people, listening to their stories. Every so often, I caught Mom watching me, her expression soft, almost reverent. Near the end of the night, she pulled me aside. Amelia, she whispered, I need to tell you something. I sold the house. I froze. What? She smiled faintly. It doesn't feel like home anymore. Too many memories that don't belong in the present. I'm moving closer to the lake near you, if that's all right. It took me a moment to speak. You don't need my permission, Mom. I know, she said, her voice trembling, but I want your blessing. I reached out and took her hand. You have it. That night, after everyone left and the lights dimmed, I stood in the gallery alone. The air smelled of paint and possibility. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent, like forgiveness made visible. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who begged to be seen, who mistook love for approval, who kept trying to prove she was enough. She was gone now. In her place stood a woman who didn't need to win to feel worthy. Months later, Mom moved into a small cottage near mine. She started volunteering at the studio, helping the children mix colors, her laughter finally unforced. Sometimes I'd catch her humming as she cleaned brushes, and I'd smile to myself. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the windows, she said quietly, You know, I think you saved me. I shook my head. No, Mom, I think we just found each other again when we were both finally ready. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I wish your father could see this. He does, I said softly, every time I paint, and I meant it. The gallery continued to grow. My students won small awards, and our art therapy sessions expanded to hospitals and shelters. One day, a journalist asked me during an interview, What drives you to do this work? I smiled and said, Because once someone made me believe I was invisible. Now I help others remember they never were. It wasn't revenge anymore, it was rebirth. On the anniversary of the gallery's opening, we hosted a small celebration. Mom sat in the front row, her smile wide, her eyes bright. Claire came too, this time bringing her own daughter, a little girl with curious eyes and a paintbrush clutched tightly in her hand. Aunt Amelia, she said shyly, Grandma says you can teach me to paint. I crouched down and smiled. Of course I can, but only if you promise me one thing. What's that? She asked. Never let anyone tell you. Your colors are too bright. She giggled, and I felt something in my chest unclench, a circle closing, a wound finally healing. As I watched her dip her brush into blue and drag it across the canvas, I thought about how strange life is, how sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who lead us to who we're meant to become. Later that night, after everyone left, I turned off the lights, leaving only one small lamp glowing in the corner. The paintings around me shimmered faintly in the dimness. I took out my journal one last time. Maybe peace isn't what comes after forgiveness, I wrote. Maybe it's what happens when you stop needing the apology. I closed the book, placed it gently on the table, and whispered to the empty room, I'm free. Outside, snow kept falling slow, endless, and kind.